welcome to Aspects of D&D. Today we're going to talk about how Dungeons and Dragons is a game about resource management, and distinctively how it is a game about resource management. All games are about resource management, but D&D is distinctively so. We're going to do it perhaps eccentrically via taking the party from the back of Against the Giants, the original tournament characters, including the very sillily named Fafel Dweomacraft, and we're going to take them through the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief and kind of look at how they use their resources to get through, or at least think about how they could. Inspired by the fact I've recently been running G1 and drawing maps for it, so I've got practical examples of my players talking about this, and not that they've used these characters. Now, D&D, like all games, as I say, is a game of resource management. Classical chess, in a casual context, is just a brain game, attempting to do non-verbal reasoning on the board. The better you are at it, the more you might be able to have developed openings and responses, but the deeper into any game, the more it is just about computation. Blitz chess, or any time chess, but blitz chess is a very good example of this because it's so short. The big thing there is time becomes a resource you have to manage. You have to make suboptimal moves, potentially, to keep in the game and create the space for an opponent's mistake. And the same with any other game, and the same with other role-playing games. I think and you look at including other D&Ds. I mostly talk about old school D&D, basic and AD&D here. But say in 4th edition D&D, the most obvious resources are your encounter powers, your daily powers, and your healing surges, plus any consumable magic items. But the fact that mostly magic items are actually less important in 4th than in many other editions. Mostly because they're kind of, a lot of it is about flat buffing or particular situational damage increase, things like that. But really, so much of it is about how do I manage my powers. I only got so many of these per day. Everyone essentially has spells, if you want to take the old school example. And healing surges, you only have you can only do a certain number of encounters in a day because your healing surges run out. Now, that's different in older school editions of D&D, and it's particularly different because of, and I've talked about this a bit in some of the previous episodes in this series, particularly probably the core play loop one, but because whether you're in the dungeon or the wilderness, but particularly in the dungeon, because you have very limited resources, not just in terms of spells, but in terms of things like torches, in terms of things like food, in terms of whatever else, traps, if you're trapping food, to add to your food resources. There's a survival game going on. And in the dungeon, that's measured in particular ways that's different to the wilderness. And we'll use a dungeon example tonight because it's probably the easiest, because the decision loop, the OODA loop that you're undertaking in D&D is clearest in the dungeon. So yeah, and the point is that you can accomplish as much as you can make your resources stretch to. D&D is a push your luck game. An example, each of my players saying, "Oh, do we want to keep some spells available for escape? At what point do we start blowing spells so we can't escape?" And their assumption was, because of the situation, they probably need to keep some absolute reserves to escape. They were very unlikely to be able to blow through everything before refreshing their resources. Now, of course, in a different context, you might say, well, no, we're going to keep pushing, or, okay, this is the boss fight, this is the leader of the enemy. We'll blow everything and leave nothing in reserve and hope for the best. So let's look at these. The 9 characters are Gleepwerp, who's a 12th level human magic user. Cloyser Bowles the Magsman, human thief, 13th level. Roki Swerkard, human cleric, 12th level. Frush Osugil, human fighter, 14th level. Fonkin Hoddypeak, high elf, fighter magic user, levels 5 and 8. Flurge Trantal, human cleric, 9th. Redmod Dumple, dwarf fighter, 9th. Fafel Dweomacraft, human magic user, 9th. Beak Gwenders of Crudel, half elf ranger, 9th. And in terms of magic items, they all have a ton of magic items plus equipment. So I'll give a sample here. Gleepwerp, the Eyebiter, human magic user, has a Wand of Fire, 20 charges, that can do Wall of Fire and Fireball. Ring of Protection +1, Braces of Defense AC 4, Robe of Blending, Scroll with Confusion and Monster Summoning 3 on it, potion of healing and 2 potions of extra healing. And his equipment, he has a spellbook presumably, and what's not mentioned here, because it's mentioned on the other page, which I'll mention in a second, is his spells. Equipment: dagger, bullseye lantern, 2 oil flasks, 50 feet of rope, 6 iron spikes, silver cross, backpack, small sack, 2 wine flasks, 2 weak rations, 20 gold pieces. Now his spells, this is Gleep, isn't it? His spells are, he has up to 6th level spells. Detect magic, charm person, and magic missile ×2. That's what he's memorized at first. Then detect invisibility, knock, phantasmal weapon, phantasmal force and web. Second, third, dispel magic, haste, lightning bolt, and monster summoning 1. Fourth, charm monster, ice storm, wall of ice, and monster summoning 2. Fifth, magic jar, teleport, and wall of stone. And at 6th, stone to flesh. Now let's talk about what. So he's got this equipment, this magic items, these general equipment items, and these spells memorized to go and punish some hill giants for their raids. And let's look in terms of his resources. In first edition terms, his stats are not living resources, generally speaking. So we don't need to look at, in that sense, his stats, because it's different in second, where you have NWPs and stuff, or indeed those versions of first where ability checks are more common. So yeah, but they're static resources. He's intelligent and has a good constitution and a good dex actually as well. He doesn't wear any armor, but his AC is 2, which I think in that case is that his surprised AC is whatever's on the back, and that he's got that because he's got the brace of AC and he's got a ring of protection and he's got a dex buff. So he is hard to hit. He's got 55 hit points. The AC is a derived stat from the resource of what he's carrying. That takes up weight. Braces and a ring aren't taking up much weight, but they are taking up weight for a guy with only strength 10. And so his encumbrance is a resource which is derived from strength. He's got 55 hit points. So for comparison, the big fighter on the team has 104. The half-elf ranger has 93. Those guys are the front rank, aren't they? He's by no means the weakest. The glass cannon high elf fighter magic user has 29 hit points, and the 9th level human magic user, having rolled lower with a slightly lower constitution, 1 lower, is 33. So he's moderate. He has stealth robe. He has wand of fire, which gives him his 20 charges, 2 for a fireball, 1 for a wall of fire, I think. He's got two spells memorized separate from whatever he's got memorized in his own head, and he's got some potions of healing, and he's got a stealth rope. And in terms of equipment, he can provide light. He can iron spikes. What are they for? They're for things like hammering open or shut indeed doors. Silver cross, good for undead in some cases. He's got a backpack and a small sack, which create not weight, like carry capacity, but carry space. So he doesn't have to hold stuff in his hands. Wine flasks and rations. Rations can be eaten or thrown to monsters. Wine flasks, traded, whatever. And he's got 20 gold pieces, and he's got rope as well. So he's got a bunch of options, and the dagger is his weapon. His Thaco is going to be 18, something like that. Yeah, it's 18. So we don't really want him in a 9th level adventure attacking anything in combat, doing D4 damage. So that's an example. You can see that he can solve particular problems with the gear he has. And remember, the dynamic of D&D in the early days means that because though the high elf, the dwarf, and the half elf can see in the dark, the 6 humans cannot. Humans with a higher level cap, without any potentially fiddly penalties to attributes, to abilities, are the most popular race. And but they can't see in the dark. They don't have infravision. Infravision itself is not dark vision. Infravision is heat vision, and so which is think that if you're running old school D&D, I think you got to get down. It's actually a different experience, and you see that some monsters are described as not emitting heat and blending perfectly with, or not rather blending perfectly with the heat of the surrounding environment, which means infravision does not spot them. It is not grayscale vision; it's heat vision. So Gleep can solve particular problems. He can bring his own light. He can help with healing. He can help with getting places or tying off while you're on a mountain or something like that. He can keep open doors that don't then swing shut, or he can then shut them. Things like that. And he has food. And everyone has food. In fact, everyone has a tiny bit of gold. And you've got some people like Beak Gwenders a Crudel that has 4 oil flasks and a tinderbox. So the oil flask could be given to someone else. Maybe he's carrying them for other people. A mage having the lantern is, though it has downsides, is a good party decision at the resource level because they're not going to be front rank. On the other hand, they're going to have to put it down if they want to cast spells because of at least anything with somatic components. The human thief has a lantern, which I guess would be a hooded lantern, and he needs that because he might go off on his own and he might need light somewhere he's going. In terms of light, the big human fighter has 5 torches, and there's loads of other oil flasks all over the party. Now, remember that sets up 2 options. One is that they're carrying them for the 2 guys with lanterns. You got to spread weight because you're often the characters you want to be your link boy, your torchbearer or whatever, are not going to be the strongest characters. Sometimes they are, but other times they're not, in which case they can't carry all the oil. So there's a resource decision at the party level there about how do you make sure you have enough light, and that includes people who don't carry light, carrying the resources for light, so in this instance carrying flasks of oil. But it's also that even though it's not Greek fire, it can be lit to create fire, obviously. That's how it works, which means if you're trying to burn somewhere down, those oil flasks are an option. You can use them as the basis of burning down the enemy's castle, fort or whatever. Other stuff you've got in the party, you've got some dust of disappearance, you've got 1 bag of holding, at least you've got plenty more potions, you've got buffed weapons and armour on the combatty characters, the big cleric with plate mail +2 and shield +2, which means he's at AC -2/1. He's got a mace +2 as well. The big fighter has a spear +3, a battle axe +1, plate mail +2, and shield +5. It means his AC is -5/1. -5, remember, in terms of if you're not as familiar with descending AC, is something like AC 15 in ascending. AC 25 in ascending. We're talking about something which is very hard to hit. A raw natural 20 though it may get an automatic hit, would not in later editions do a critical hit on its own. It's a very, very tough character with 104 hit points too, which again, if you're spitballing, is something like 208 hit points in later editions, in D20 editions. So the fighter has his magic items are geared towards being able to hit things very hard and being able to tank up. That is a meaningful way to think about it. Whereas, let's find out the cleric has a staff of the other cleric has a staff of striking, a hammer +1, a plate mail +2, and potions. The other magic user has a wand of frost, cloak of protection +2, ring of protection +3, scroll with shield, phantasmal force, web, and pass wall, and some potions of healing, etc., and so on and so forth. And the ranger has a crossbow of speed, sneezing dust, dust of appearance, and dust of disappearance. So you've got a bunch of stuff. You can reveal things, you can make things disappear. You've got lots of healing spread over the party. Everyone can heal themselves, in fact, if they are up and awake. In terms of spells for healing, I think the ranger at level 9 is getting spells. Is that the first? Beak. Beak. Yeah, he's got Fairy Fire ×2 Ventriloquism. He could memorise a different spell, of course, as using druid spells. And there's 2 clerics, So you've got 3 healers potentially, 2 of whom are actually going to have healing spells memorised, and everyone has healing. You've got 2 wands which give particular effects. You have so on and so forth. And so these are all resources that are going to be depleted potentially. I mean, even magic items can be destroyed. Certainly by a disenchanter, they can be destroyed, but they can also be destroyed even in a fireball or something like that, or a large collapse of items on top of a PC who might survive that but lose an item nonetheless. So let's start our adventure. Oh, not that we'll go too far, you understand, but just to give a sense of it. So you start out, you're sent and you're in a cave somewhere, I guess, facing it, and you can have a look. This is a weird wooden Scandinavian church with a tower directly attached to like a big squarish yurt. There's a yard at the back, and there's a service block back here. So you can find that out, and one suspects that generally speaking, you should be able to find that out fairly easily. Certainly, because now the way it's set up is that on the night they arrive, there are no guards really active. The two guards who should be here are in here. The guard up the tower is also sleepy. They can be taken out. The other ways in are disadvantageous because they both go through the yard, which has loads of dire wolves in. Now, you could say, no, we'll still go for that and we'll give meat to the dire wolves. That's something which is an option, certainly. It's an option my players toyed with upon their entry. They thought, should we go and get some deer and just throw them in? I don't know. Yeah, so that's, that's the... those are the options, and there's also fireplaces, some of which, to be fair, aren't marked as lit. So here, for instance, in the guest quarters, I don't think it's lit, and I don't think the chieftain, which I think is this one, is that 8? I don't think that's described as lit. So you could also enter via a 10-foot wide chimney space. However, it's unlikely to be 10 foot wide at the top, so you're going to have some rulings on who can get down. Are we actually saying that a fighter in plate mail +2 is going to be able to climb down that? You can get a thief in, certainly. That feels more realistic. He could come and scout, or you could get out. I don't know if any of the magic users have find familiar or would have a familiar with them, but you can see the same principle is there. Well, you could get something in there. You could send someone in to have a look. So, let's say given the general description, it says, Gary says, you can get in here and you've got a 1 in... If you have an immediate plan to get rid of these two guys, you have a 1 in 20 chance of failure. The rest of it's a success. I think you could apply a similar thing to these guys up here in the tower, the one guy in the tower. So let's assume that doesn't take any resources. It takes a little bit of care. Let's say the thief climbs up, spots the guy in the tower, and decides on his own cognizance to sneak in and cut his throat. He's got, he's very sneaky. He is a 13th level thief, which, in terms of what's his move silently per the first edition thief? He's pretty sneaky. He's not going to struggle desperately to get in there versus a guy who's very asleep. So his 13th level move silently is 99%. He gets in there. He gets in there fine. I mean, there's certain conditions around that to do with armor, race, etc. But I think we can assume that he is fine. So he gets in there, and he kills that guy, and then throws a rope down the outside, and everyone else climbs up. You could also have them. They could via spending some time hunting, throw some meat in there, or at this level, when you're talking about the options they have, they can pretty reliably kill animals quickly. Now, the one caveat is that takes time, which means they might lose the chance of entering on their first raid during the feast that the chieftain is having in here in the Great Hall. But then they could do that the next night anyway, and avoid the now alert guards. But let's say they're going for sleepy guards. It's the better idea, certainly. Sneak up here or sneak in there anyway. Kill them quickly, come down, and do the same with a 5% chance of failure, assuming nothing very stupid happens. They then have options they don't have much context for. And this is okay. Not every decision has to be made on kind of enormous amounts of context. They've got a big door here from which you may well have more noise even without a listen at doors check, which is 1 in 6 check for anyone other than the thief. The thief will have a very good score. Or 2 single doors, so that's 10 foot wide roughly. I think it describes them as 6 foot wide and 7 foot tall or something for a single door. Now, this is the service wing over there. 15, 16, 17, 18 is kitchen and kitchen storage and stuff. And it's fairly quiet here. There's no guards posted. You've got chances of wandering monsters who that's a point. My copy of Against the Giants has a missing sentence there. You see this? Isn't that very annoying? Yeah, but yes, it's going to be presumably each turn, and it's going to be 1 in 8 or 1 in 12 for the east. So we're in the western section here, and I think it's going to be 1 in 8 or 1 in 12. Probably, let's say 1 in 12 every turn. So if it's 1 in 12, it's a pretty low chance, isn't it? But the thing is, there is a time resource here. Is that's every 10 minutes, every exploration turn, the characters may have a risk of being found, and they can be found by orcs rushing to get shields for platters, hill giants from the hall coming to sleep off, being drunk, or ogres going to get one of the guards, or someone going for a stroll. All kinds of people you could meet, and there are lots of mechanics for how you deal with that. Obviously, particularly reaction checks and encounter distance and surprise. But that's a risk. You don't want to be discovered, and none of those are friendly encounters. None of those is it's that there's some potentially fun encounters on the list. In fact, I'd say the cloud and the stone giants in the Great Hall section here, if you're kind of in and around that area, is that they could be friendly potentially. Nothing else is friendly. Now, or nothing else is particularly friendly. You might trick it into being friendly. But yes, so you've got the service wing over here, and I guess as it's quiet, you might be able to open the door and find out without any great risk, but you need to be exploring quickly and not spending loads of time checking everything, because every turn you're checking to see if there's an encounter. On the other side, you've got the chief's own quarters. You've got the hall of the chief, you've got his chamber, you've got his wife's chamber, you have the barracks of his guards, you've got the chieftainess's maid's chamber, you've got the sub-chief's room here, and you have a dormitory for young giants here. So you have, this is more heavily populated at this point because there are people asleep in, or in, not necessarily asleep, because they're not. There's the young giants who are awake in the dormitory, sleeping giants in 4, and giantesses in 5, with including the matron. They are awake. So there's a lot more potential trouble here. You can see the design, by the way, includes the idea that these young giants might be seen as, any noise they have fighting you is seen as just they're being boisterous with each other. And here the door faces this way. No one is stepping out of the door to come into the Great Hall immediately. So warnings are hard to give, but nonetheless, this is the more occupied section. It's also the more valuable section in many or most respects, because more of these rooms have more treasure in them. Gold equals XP. However, so I suppose it might be that you avoid this door because it's very noisy. That would be the correct play. You come here, and you open the door and you hear noise from here, perhaps, and yeah, you may even hear, if you spend a turn listening in the corridor, to snoring here. On this side, you won't hear anything. There's no one in here, here, or here, so you might come through here. Now, you're checking each turn to see if you get an encounter, but in a 1 in 12, you should be able to, on average, get away without an encounter by this point. And then you're checking the rooms, and you really want to be checking them quickly. Now, how is that going to go? Well, not many challenges so far, uh, assuming no encounter. The arsenal room, there's nothing much valuable there. At the weapons room, there's giant-sized weapons, including some 6-foot long spears you could use because the giants use them for javelins. Most stuff is too big. But there is behind one shield there is a Warhammer +2, and behind in the corner there is an enchanted hammer, which is enchanted with a magic mouth, which speaks it to a dwarf, and so it's a trick item. So here you have a thing where in here you either have to thoroughly search, in which case you'll find these items, but you won't know they're magical, or you have to pretty quickly start busting out your detect magics. Now, the party as a whole, which has 3 MUs, doesn't it? Gleep, Fonkin, and Faffle. Gleep has 1 detect magic. Fonkin has none. He has read magic, and Faffle does not have it. So you've got 1 detect magic, and then you have a detect magic on the second cleric as well. So you've got 2 detect magics. Do you blow that in an armory? That's an interesting question, isn't it? 2. Now, you might be able to come back another day. You might get 2 raids out of this, but the second raid will be against prepared enemies. So let's assume you're just hoping to get in there and cause some chaos and kill some giants and dissuade them from further raids. In that case, do you do it here or do you do it in what might seem like a higher value target? Armories could be high value, but if you take away one of that, that's 50% of your detect magic ability gone. We don't have any first or second edition barbarians here, but the first and the second edition barbarian have a raw detect magic chance, and I don't think anyone has anything like any relevant magic items. So yeah, I think in that case you're also probably not using a dust of appearance because you don't know what's there. So probably you just search thoroughly. You take the Wandering Monster check chance, and you probably find the 2 hammers. You might pick them up. I think it's not a reasonable thing to pick up 2 human-sized hammers. They might be valuable. Give them to someone who can carry a lot. You come back out. So you spent potentially 1, but as a DM, I'd give this one as a freebie turn. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At this point, you spent an hour in here. Now here, the other thing to say is that none of this is described as lit, and you have 6 humans, and so you're going to have, though you might well send, and your thief is a human. You might say, oh, I'll just send the half-elf ranger ahead. That's fine. That is plausible, but it's not ideal, especially in first edition, and so you're going to have light. You're going to have to start using stuff. Flasks of oil last for 4 hours. The thief is fine. You might want, given how much oil there is, you might want to have the halfway light also be a lantern rather than the torches. The torches, which only last an hour, are much less durable. At this point you can go this way. Now your light isn't going to, generally speaking, get that far down the corridor. You might have to send someone down, in which case they hear noise here and here. Well, raw noise here because this is a kitchen without a door. And I think it's going to be loud enough here that they'll hear noise here. So they might well choose to go this way. If they go this way, you're gonna that stuff like that move silently checks for the thief if he's on his own, or if the elf. I think it's only wilderness for the elf, isn't it? But yes, is it? Someone correct me in the comments. But basically things like surprise and move silently checks are going to matter a lot here if someone's going ahead whilst the garrison is otherwise undisturbed, other than killing 3 giants here. So let's say they go this way. Well, the 3 rooms, these 2 are basically empty. This one has a gem in it. Oh no, this one has a single gem in it, 100 GP gem. It's not particularly valuable. You don't want to spend very much time trying to find it. Basically, there is it's plausible because the room description, they open the door, they walk in, they've got light. As long as they can spread the light around, they can see everything. You describe the room, they react. In that case, in this one, in room 16, they could say, well, there's a chest, I try to open it. It's not described as locked, they do. There's human and elf ears. One of them has a valuable earring in it. I guess you might say it's going, and this is not unreasonable, it'll take you an extra turn to search the box. In which case, a turn for 100 gold is a bad exchange. That's 100 XP spread amongst 9 characters. or 100 gold and or 100 gold pieces on the market. So these two are dud rooms. This gives you a very small return, but you don't want to spend an extra turn there, certainly. Remember, at this point we'd be at 7, 8, 9 turns. Here, 14, this is more interesting. Here we have 6. This is where the Cloud Giant and the 3 Stone Giants who are visiting are at. There's the contents. There's some worthless chests, some worthless bags. There is a list for bag treasure, but it's mostly pretty minimal treasure. So even if you were to let them roll on the bag list, it wouldn't be very valuable. There is a torch burning at one end, and there at the other end there is what appears to be an unlit torch. And there's a fireplace which is presumably not lit. You can see this is the fireplace there. So here there is a sconce with an unlit torch. So this is actually a magic sword in illusory disguise. Again, when you're looking around, do you drop a detect magic here? This is a better candidate, because but you have to be facing the right direction. That's the other thing. Is at least with this, you could potentially say, I'm gonna kind of, I'll take out an entire row of that like that, and that's going to be, you know, concretely, there'll be fewer squares unchecked that way. In absolute terms, here is similar. You can get, I guess, a third of the room in, but yes, detect magic is going to be unreliable. Does anyone have detect illusion? They're going to have to guess detect illusion matters here, which certainly feels less likely. It feels a lot more marginal, doesn't it? So yeah, they're not going to spend that. So again, you're going to have to interact here. People ignore unlit torches, but also someone might think, torches, we only have 5 of those, and they pick it up, and it turns out to be a giant slaying sword. So whose master is actually a necessarily neutral good cloud giant, so who might be able to be befriended as well. So you spent a lot of time. You spent 10 turns here. One thing here is, obviously, if you get a random encounter around here, you might have it coming through these doors. You might actually very quickly become exposed to what's the main party. Blocking these doors might be a good idea, particularly this door, in which case you might well be using either a resource there like one of the javelins, or you might use the spikes that are on our friend Gleep. He has 6 iron spikes, I think. Yes, so does the thief. He has 6 iron spikes, as does the human fighter. So, you know, one of the you're going to spend a resource, either one of your own resources or an environmental one, probably, if you're doing a good job, to stop that being a problem. Now, given this is actually a relevant point, each of these doors has to be opened via a open doors check. This does present 2 potential issues. One is a failure takes up time. You might have a DM judge against your noise, but that's probably over harsh in this instance. It's a very noisy environment. But yes, so you waste time by failing, so you want your strongest character to do it, which is going to be presumably the fighter. The dwarf fighter, in fact, who has 1874, so he is comfortably your strongest character. Which is, is that going to be a... again, let's check that. But also, the doors might shut on you, so this brings up the iron spike as well. If they swing behind you, you have to spend time on the way out, like opening it. This is bad. 1874 is open doors 1 to 4 on a d6. So this is bad. You don't want to have to check on a 66% chance of success with your dwarf running around hitting stuff that you get out. So you're probably going to spike this door. So that's 1 spike down. You may spike this door because it opens into a corridor. You're less likely to spike room doors, though if you spend, because you can probably have someone hold the door. But if you're planning to camp somewhere, you might well do so. So from here, because this seems to go towards a noisy door, you might come this way. Of course, if you've scouted to this cross section without discovery, you'll know that that is a noisy room too. So you might have a plan. You know there are people in there, so either you backtrack and go this way, which is an option, or you work out a plan for containing these people. In which case, because there are 29 orcs, 5 giantess serving maids, and 11 ogre servants who don't want to fight, and the orcs will just flee without doing anything, but the ogres and the giantesses will flee shouting, and that means you're likely they're going to flee here. You could flee this way towards 18. Um, there are 6 more maids and a handsome giant warrior spending time with them, and he he may shout as well. But again, they've got who they're going to be heard by. It depends, So what you might want to do is strategically herd the bad guys this way. But you might also want to. Does anyone have silence? This thing, I don't think they do. But if someone has silence, oh yeah. So Flurd has silence, 15-foot radius. Flurd the cleric, the human cleric, who's 9th level. So if you know this is the plan, if you know this is what you want to do, you possibly drop a silence ball in whatever strategic position you think you need to stop them shouting. One problem is if you say we'll just walk past this way, which seems attractive in some ways, is that's an open portal. That's intentional design. It is, I would say, unless you've got a thief moving silently or whatever, you're going to be spotted by default. So you need to stop them moving. Now you could say, well, we want to silence them and then tie them all up. Well, you've got to stop them escaping. So you want a party here, and at this point, this is your 10th. Is that right? 10th turn. You also probably want to get your mage, your first. This is Gleep, to drop a wall of fire here. That's risky because there are people up here, but it's somewhere away, and maybe if it's here by the fireplace, then it's a bit more subtle. It's out of direct line of sight from anywhere other than here, and the heat may be explainable. I don't know. That's a risk you're going to have to choose to take or not. But those are going to be charges. If you spend them, they are charges of the 20 charges you have. That's one charge. This is so far so easy. Let's say that succeeds. You come and maybe you add a few more refinements to it. You can see Funkin does actually have Wall of Fire memorized. It's a spell, which may be a better way to spend it so that you can have a potential fireball in the future, because you need 2 charges for a fireball. So yeah, anyway, you do that. Let's say you successfully silence them. No one gets out of the radius. The reaction check as you come from the other side, with them trapped there, trapped here, and barricaded off here, and being called to surrender here, they surrender. That's going to take some luck, but I think that's plausible. At that point, that's great. You tie them up, you gag them, you've cleared that side. There's not really anything in there. It's a low value encounter, but you may continue on. You might say, well, we don't want to go to the Great Hall, and the Wall of Fire there. Well, let's go up to this door. Listen, you got to check there. That's going to take time. At this point, you're on 11 turns, so let's assume on the 12th you'll definitely get an encounter. Either way, you go in, and there is a handsome giant warrior who will do battle, and he will eventually, at 50% or lower, he will call for help. And interestingly, he has there's a whip beside the door to the east, which is relevant because it's the direwolf whip. He's the direwolf keeper, so if you pick it up, you get a pass. You get a kind of a cheat code on the direwolves. So yeah, at this point, you've got to take this guy out quickly, because if you chip him down, he might have several rounds. His HP being 43. Now the fighter, who is going to be base Thaco 7, with his spear he's Thaco 4, and he'll be doing strength 17 plus 2 plus 5 damage, so 1d6 plus 5 damage or something like that. The battle axe slightly less in general. So he can lay out damage. He's also got multiple attacks per round, of course. So this is the relevant thing, is that you're hoping that if you can get Frusho Sugal in, he can pile up the damage. The same with the Roki, the human cleric with a mace. You're probably using him for that, and probably the dwarf fighter as well. The other cleric is slightly less optimal, though he's a second rank fighter, so you in such a case he'll probably swarm in. Uh, Now, of course, you might choose to have someone uh, rear guarding there, so that if you have anyone come up from there, or if there's a problem from here, it's clear. So you might be one person down. At this point, this is a hard situation to contain because you've got a tough monster doing 2d8 damage. I think something like that. Is it 2d8 damage and the ability to throw rocks as well, and he can alert the enemy. So you're gonna have to take him out quickly. Now, is there anything? This one might be. I mean, this might be something where the you open the door with I don't know, Faffle prepared to fire a magic missile in, or Fafflang lead with magic missiles set up. I think that's reasonable. You basically want to have an ability to uh, round one, even if someone loses a spell to missile fire, very quickly get a shot off. It depends what you spot. There's an awkward shape to this room, which is intentional. So yeah, you're probably spending, to get rid of that guy quickly, as well as getting in your close combat guys, you're probably spending a couple of spells to soften him up. Everyone else charges in, and probably particularly relying on your two fighters who are getting multiple attacks at good Thaco. Take him out. Giantess is presumably not a massive problem, especially if there's still a wall of fire here, but even if so. 18A is a storage room. The relevant thing here is that you actually get non-secret stairs to the lower level. Now, this might be tempting, but at this point, I think most parties are going to correctly divine that they've killed 4 giants and there's a lot of other complex to go, so they might well hold that to later. I don't know. We'll assume they hold it to later for now. At this point, if we're going on a 1 in 12 chance, they are going to have a random encounter. It's a d4 chance of orcs, hill giants, ogres, or hill giant. So it's a 50-50% chance of hill giants. These are counted against the mass of hill giants in room 11, i.e. the Great Hall. So that's helpful, at least, because you know that you mark them off there. Yeah, that's the Long Hall and the Great Hall. So, assuming it's hill giants who have wandered, I mean, at this point you're describing that they're wandering either to join their handsome friend, or they're wandering to the kitchen to get some extra food. You've got a problem here because they really could just book it back. If it's the orc slaves, they are much less of a threat. The ogres are already looking to go for one of the guards somewhere. So, who knows? But if they're coming up this way, then if they see you, they can quickly run back. And so you're going to, again, have to probably... This is something where... what? Fireballs make noises. Does Faffle cast his invisibility bolt? His lightning bolt, sorry? Possibly you want to drop some... You've got some options in there, like confusion. He has a 4th level confusion. Fonkin has 3rd level suggestion. Gleed also has lightning bolt at 3rd level. Yeah, do you do something like that, or do you pop up another wall of fire? At this point, if you've used the spell, you're now definitely using charges off the wand behind the characters to shut them off. Yeah, so you're using it. Certainly, you also at this point, because you fought now potentially five or perhaps 6 hill giants, and even assuming you've kept stealth at this point, you're now going to have to almost certainly either drink some potions or cast some Cure Light Wounds, and that's very arguable as to which is better, because the Cure Light Wounds, Flird has 1, Roki has 4, but everyone has potions, and so it kind of depends on the damage. If it's a lot of damage, actually potions of extra healing may be better because of a higher average heal. But yeah, so you're going to have to start using up healing resources. Probably not very many if you've done this well, but you can see that already, having cleared out functionally a third-ish of this level, of the upper level, you've spent some spells, you've used some iron spikes, you might have used some consumables, some potions, and at this point probably, you know, apart from the ranger, it might be that everyone has cast a spell. Magic missile each, a silence 15-foot radius, and a suggestion, something like that. You can see what might have happened by now. Now, these rooms, let's assume that we're now going to go into these rooms. That's going to be 3 turns, assuming no massive complications. But there is a complication. So 19. Servants' quarters, there are giantess maids. Oh, sorry, 18 is the kitchen workroom. Completely screw up on my part. There's no one in there, so you check that. Then you encounter people. Then you go up here and do all that stuff with the handsome giant warrior and the maids. That is how you access 20, so I guess you check 20 next. Orc slave quarters. There are 2 injured orcs. Now, these orcs are too sick to work, and they are happy to befriend the characters. They know there is unrest down in the dungeon, which you've discovered, and they are willing to help you if you spare their lives. So they can give you information and they can give you guidance. This is a rare friendly encounter on what is a classic base assault. This is not a resource use, but it's good to note that that's going to inform your actions. You might say, well, let's go downstairs and cause more trouble, or you might continue. I think probably initially you might say, well, let's at least, check outside. If we've worked out the whip here, which is going to be over here, maybe we go outside and deal with the dire wolves. That's a marginal one. I think unless you can interrogate that giant, the whip is just an item. It's a kind of a who knows what this does kind of item. You might guess. A player might guess. But yes, I think you're probably at least going to be tempted to know what's out there. Okay, that connects to the yard. And you're going to want to check out 21. 21, so this is on the new set of turns. 1, 2. 1, 2, and then you're heading back round, so it's going to be your 3rd turn. These are the ogre quarters. They are trusty flunkies, and there are 5 of them here playing knucklebones and drinking small beer. One of them does have a Storm Giant Strength Potion and a Delusion Potion, and the strongest ogre has 1000 GP gem, a 900, and then also has a key to a chest with 79 platinum, 705 gold, 955 silver, and they are playing for a small amount of copper. Noise from here will attract no attention whatsoever, because it's much like the young giants over here. They're expected to be boisterous. This is something where the party should, given the ogres are 26, 23, 18, 16 and 15 HP, they can win in combat. You want to listen at doors checks, but I guess it's not guaranteed that you'll succeed. So you're going to bust in either way, on a whatever percentage chance of success. I mean, to be fair, the thief is going to have a pretty good, because it's flat, isn't it? So he's going to have a pretty good hear noises. Let's double check that one. Hear noise. 40%, so it's not amazing. The standard is 16%, remember. So it's okay, more or less 50-50 chance for functional, purposes. So, okay, great. You bust in and you fight the ogres. Again, it won't alert anyone. It's not creating any extra monster checks. But, and you're going to win. It's not, you shouldn't see your front rank warriors going down here. If your front ranks has, and they've just healed as well, 104, 70, 82, 93 HP, and assume you've got a 56 HP cleric in the second rank, you should be able to overpower these guys. The question is, there's a cost benefit, because the more spells you use now, let's say you use some magic missiles, let's say you use a suggestion on, if you have a suggestion left. I think there's a couple of people with suggestion, but if not a suggestion, is there a command around? Maybe. But something like that, you drop something on them to hold person. Would that work on an ogre? Ogre's too big, isn't it? But yeah, maybe a confusion, maybe a charm monster. Gleed will charm monster. He charms the monster and gets one of them on your side. That's great, but obviously and that will save hit points. It'll save healing items, healing spells, it may well be that one in the hand is better than two in the bush. You might say, like, or you might say, no, we'll use the resource of hit points to do this. At this point, we should still be on our first flask of oil because we've spent 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah. So we are. Now, one thing is if you've added in, if you are having rest turns, you've had 2 rest turns as well, so it's 17 at this point. Because you have to rest 1 in every 6 rules as written. So actually it's 17. So your time's ticking on, and you've won this battle, and either you've soaked up using your hit points and then you've healed up afterwards, and you've hoped that, frankly, there's enough healing potions. Healing potions are much more ubiquitous than Charm Monster, so actually that might be a decent choice. Cure Light Wounds is less ubiquitous, but you might also use one of those. So you've also got, hopefully, your first good and fairly easy to access haul. It's not an amazing haul. You are at this point, remember, 9th to 14th level, but hopefully there's some payback here. You've got he's wearing a gem that's worth 1000 GP, and there's another 1500 GP in the box. So 2500 GP as well as the XP from killing them. And 2 potions if you find them. They are harder. It's a classic Gygaxian trick. One's a delusion potion. It doesn't say what it's generated, but presumably it's a delusion of strength. That feels funny. Or it's actually a strength potion. So, and unless you're identifying them, which I don't think anyone is running identify here. And identify is an incredibly obnoxious spell to have to cast in the dungeon. Basically not worth it. You're just going to have to find out. So they're marginal items. Now they are worth XP, obviously. So it's an okay haul, and at this point, it's also probably the toughest combat you've had in some respects, but also one of the safest in terms of you can win it, and there's no chance of escape once you've got into the door. This, which shouldn't be a combat because everyone flees, it doesn't have to be a combat, is much more dangerous to you. So yeah, you've dropped a bunch of spells here, here, and here. So and you've added some stuff. You maybe have added a magic sword here. You've added a couple of potions here. The whip may or may not be useful if you can work out its function. You've added information here, and you have at this point presumably killed. If you've killed 2 wanderers, 3 there. 4, 5, 6. You've killed 6 hill giants. You've started to pay, a cost, and there's no reason to stop yet. And now, we'll wind it in here. You can see the general idea of how resources are being managed and how the players have to decide what to do with them. In a practical example, you see they've got to manage light because most of their characters need light. They've got to manage time because every single action they take that's at the kind of exploration level, not in combat, is costing them a 1 in 12, an 8% chance, whatever it is, of an enemy turning up. They've got to manage their spell use because some problems, like a room which has 3 exits, one of which bears, and is the most dangerous one, and you can't sneak past easily, bears directly onto the enemy headquarters, basically. You've got to contain a very complex situation there. Here, there's a chance of the guy being heard, but you have it because of his own pride. You have a chance to take him out quickly. So again, you're probably expending resources. If you're wise, that's the thing. It's wiser, unless you're really thinking, because with 43 HP, maybe you take him out in 2 rounds and he doesn't get a chance to warn anyone. The ogres, this is a less dangerous fight to you in terms of detection, which is much more risky than damage is, much more danger to you as than just taking damage. But also gives you a small haul for the first time. So yeah, you're trading hit points, you're trading time, you're using up your light resource, and though there's lots of flasks of oil, you might want them for other purposes. It is explicitly said at the start, the PCs could manage to burn down. It's very damp, but they could burn it down somehow. They've got a lot of oil. If they do, it takes 2 weeks. All of the loot is destroyed, but the main group of giants in 11 escape. I think they go down here, is it? This one? The secret passage down, and they hole up in the level below. So it's that, which is very much a marginal victory. It's actually probably less good than um, being stealthier, but it's an option, and that would be a way to use that resource. Now, the PCs have lots of resources. They should really be expecting to continue one way or another. Now, they've got it for 2 or 3 times as long. At least, maybe at least twice as long before they need to camp up. I suppose it depends if you have a fight reswing against you. You could say, no, we need to take a break and rest. Now, there's 2 obvious routes. One is this one down, and we won't do this, but we'll just see again the decisions. Going down, you don't know what's downstairs. You're going to have to scout it, and I guess that's going into the thing with that is that's going into the marshalling area. Now, there's no one actually in the marshalling area when you go down, which helps. So you do get a free access point if you come down here. You're onto the Wandering Monster table down here, obviously, but you at least can have a look. Or you can go out into the yard. Now you have to work out the dire wolves there, obviously, because the dire wolves are a problem. There's lots of them. I mean, you're talking about something crazy. There's 14 from 25 hit points down to 12. Now they attack you. It makes a point. Note if they see the whip, however, they can make no sound, but otherwise they howl and bite. The point there being the howl is a reasonable chance of people detecting that you're there, and therefore making your problem much bigger. There is. There's actually no one up in this barracks block, which does make that slightly safer. But I mean, yes, I think it'd be reasonable to expect that these people might hear if there's commotion here. So it's going to be a sticky fight, worse than the ogres, and more chance of detection. That's not ideal. Going down to the dungeon may be better at this point. The only other option, remember, you've really got, well, the only options you've got are track all the way around and head up this way. That's reasonable. Or bust in and fight all the giants. That seems bad. There are 9 of you still, and there's no assumption of henchmen here, so we'll assume it's just 9. At this point, there are 20 hill giants, a cave bear, 8 ogres, 3 stone giants, cloud giants, sub-chief, and the chief and his wife. And the chief is equivalent to a frost giant. You have the sword, which I think, and you have the information from the orcs. The orcs, of course, might be pointing you towards, you might find allies elsewhere, which is why you go downstairs. The sword could get the cloud giant on your side, or it could be that he's enraged by the fact you've taken his sword. There's a bit of a question there. It's a risky strategy, let's say. If you could separate him and talk to him, then you might find an ally against the rising evil giant alliance. So you've got choices, but you're probably not going to do this. That is, this play into there, it increases your risk quotient, and this you're taking a lot of time resource to go around, but maybe that's worth it. Yeah, so probably either do the quickest thing, go downstairs, or do the next safest thing, but expending the time resource, and potentially getting to your next encounter and head to the eastern section. Hopefully there's like a practical example there of why tracking light and tracking spells, tracking open door checks, all these things connect together to show the kind of resource management game that old school D&D is, and why it's so good, why it's so satisfying, why the choices are satisfying for players, why that's worth doing. If you have got some other input, some other thoughts about how this works in your experience, or just kind of things I've missed, then please do tell me in the comments, and I will see you next time.